you and why do we care?
Well, I've been teaching since 1972. So I've been very fortunate in that there were virtually no aids around other than World Tennis Magazine and a few books by Ed Faulkner and and that's how we all learned. And so I've seen the transition all the way up through there and the addition of all the fantastic things that are available for pros today. And my ambition, of course, was to work with players, and they taught me everything that I know. As the saying goes, the player makes the coach doesn't make the player. And if you learn enough from your students and you really care enough about them, the rest will take care of itself if you're curious. Anyway, so after teaching, and I've taught from all different levels, WTA, ATP, all the way down to little tykes, 6 and 7-year-olds. And after 50 years of that, one of the main themes was, okay, what can we do as an industry to help out? Now, we get the ball machine entry in the 70s. We have the videotape. Now you can video matches and have them analyzed, not only from a technical standpoint, but you can also have your stats gathered. And one of the issues with the latest tool would be Tennis Analytics. And we got to come up with a better name for that because that scares everybody off. And what I found is that analytics the only analytics that people understand would be, well, baseball's easy, basketball is easy, track and field, my goodness, you need a stopwatch and you can become world famous in your backyard before you ever compete. And all of them have benchmarks that allow you to understand where you are, and you can go to videos and learn what you can do about it. That sort of so the self-starter actually has a great chance today, almost as good a chance today as they did back in the 60s and 70s, because they make use of what's available to them. Well, analytics for tennis has never been used. I say I lie. Let me show you the first visible evidence of analytics in tennis.
Okay.
This is back in the 60s. And a guy by the name of Bruce Old started doing statistics. And the way he did it wasn't statistics as we know it, but he showed how top players win their points. And then he proceeded to...
Sorry, Andy, what's the name of the book for those on audio only?
It's a game of Bruce Old. You can see he did a series of 5 books, tennis, the game of singles, doubles, singles and doubles. And these were all done in the 60s. So good luck finding the books, but they're out there.
I like books.
But this is how
thank you.
he would go to matches and analyze with pieces of paper like all the rest of us did, but he would draw out diagrams of what went on in the point preceding the winning shot, not just the winning shot, but what led up to it. And of course, this was this, along with like Ed Faulkner's books and that sort of thing, paved the way for all of us to kind of say, oh, this is what tactics and strategy look like. Right. So that was the first incidence of it. The second major thing was back in the early 80s. And this is when I got connected with analytics. This is the computer that we used at Wimbledon and at all the major tennis events, junior and senior, Junior Davis Cup. Arthur Ashe used it at Davis Cup. Billie Jean used it at Whiteman Cup. So this is what came into through Bill Jacobson and CompuTennis. That's when I got involved with analytics, and we use this one of the reasons I started RacketStats is this computer that I bought in 1984 just died 4 years ago.
My gosh. Tell me the name of the computer. Which one is it specifically?
Well, it's an Epson HX-20, which actually, this is the very first laptop computer, portable computer ever made. It's in the Smithsonian, not this one, but the Epson version. Now, Bill Jacobson had a background in computer science and other things, and he was also a player from South Africa. he got together with some friends of his at Stanford who worked in part for Apple and all that. And what they did is they redesigned the inside of this thing so that the keys represented different things. For instance, what shot was it? Was it a winner, forced error, unforced error? What area did it go to? That sort of thing. And so this is where I became aware of analytics, and I used it with a boy who eventually became number 4 in the world Boyce. Now, he only made it in the top 300 as a player because he had a back issue. And this was before the days where we really had all the physical fitness people that understood these injuries before they happened. So anyway, a lot of the injuries that occurred, like to Roscoe Tanner's shoulder, probably could be prevented today, but not back then. Anyway, so that's where I got my start. Now, when that computer died, I started looking around for other, apps and programs to use. There was Swing Vision.
Hang on.
Yes.
Hang on.
Yeah.
That computer died 4 years ago.
Mhm.
You were still using that computer 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you in audio only, that's not going to make any sense. You got to see this thing. If you know what like a TA86 is, that's basically this thing. It's slightly big. Like we're talking about the first laptop. It's a keyboard with a ticket. Oh my gosh. Okay. So you use that all the way through. And then you
Yeah.
somehow decided, hey, I got an idea. This is 40 years old. Maybe we need something better.
Well, it's not better. What Bill was not able to do back then, and we had talked about it back then, was get analytics to the masses. This computer today would run over $3,000 in yesterday's terms. So it wasn't something that mom and dad could go out and get. We used to charge like $65 a match back then to do the analytics because there was no other way of getting it. This computer was responsible for the very first TV broadcast using analytics. And that was, I believe, it was CBS. And I handled a group of statisticians at Wimbledon for 2 years when HBO had their hands on it. Then IBM took over, and the rest is history. It's just gotten better and better. But those are the only kind of stats that most of us understand. How much spin was on the ball? How did blah, blah, blah. What was the speed of the ball? Where did it go? And depth and all that sort of thing, which is incredibly advanced. And if you think about the equipment that it takes to get it to that point, you're talking millions of dollars to do all that stuff. Well, it has always left the developing player, the mom and dad who have little Johnny or Sarah, who's beginning to hit the ball back and forth with mom and dad or coach or whatever. And what we see happen is a fact that half the people we bring in every year disappear. Not them, but somebody. There's a rotation. So the number of juniors actually staying involved in tennis stays about the same. I think it runs around 65,000 across the country that are playing USTA events, something like that. Anyway, those people, it just rotates over and over. Very few ever make it past that. And one of the reasons, just one, is the fact that they don't know if they're getting any better. How do you know if your students or your son or daughter is actually getting better? I throw that back at you guys.
Well, I'd ask the leading question. My assumption you're going to think that you're going to answer is to say, well, there's math that can show us that. Bobby, you and I have more of a subjective version of gauging the kid's development.
Yeah, I mean, you can watch them from a drill perspective, obviously wins and losses, tournament rankings. Now we're getting empirical with UTRs. So, it's all improving. But yeah, historically, how good are you? Well, I beat that guy, so I'm okay.
Exactly. And you can have good days and bad days, blah, blah, blah. Hey, I'm with you guys. I've been there for 50 years. And I know it's very frustrating to tell a parent that their kid is actually getting better by doing something which actually makes their game worse. And we all go through this thing. So how in the world do you do it? Well, there's only one way. It's just like, hey, you're shooting ball. You're shooting free throws. How do you know if you're getting better? You hit 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10,
Count.
4 out of 10.
Right.
You really, yeah, you count. Well, how do you know if you're getting better in track? Stopwatch. How do you know if you're getting better in anything? And there's a way of measuring your pitch count in baseball versus the number of balls that you throw, the whole bit. So tennis is way behind in that, and that's what I've designed RacketStats to take over with, because it is available to the public. It has almost as much information in it as that computer did for all the pros. And we use that primarily with top juniors at the Junior Davis Cup level to the pros. But we also used it with smaller groups. But there are a few parents that actually bought it. Steve Smith at Tyler Junior College used these with his students. So it's been around for a while, but not something that's available to mom and dad, and it's affordable and can be easily be used.
All right, so you mentioned jumping in 4 years ago and deciding you wanted to stay in the statistics world, and because that's what you understand, that's what you get, that's where you should be, that's intellectually what you get. So what did you find, or maybe even not find, because there were other things out there that could potentially offer what's going on? You mentioned Swing Vision. There might be a couple others that are out there either doing their version of what you're talking about. What did you find or not find that led you to feel you needed to do it yourself rather than saying, hey, this is great, thanks, some other app?
You're right. They were out there, about 10, 12 of them are out there. Of the ones that I saw back then, probably half of them are still around. I just found they didn't give me the information I wanted, and they didn't give it to me in a way that I understood. Some of them were a little bit more difficult to use, particularly the ones that involve placement and that. So you had to put your finger on the spot, and if you screwed up, then you have to undo it. And it was just, I can't see the average parent using that sort of thing. And I thought, well, I wouldn't use it either. So I wanted to do my own. So I guess the philosophy behind RacketStats is that I interviewed 50 developers, most of them in the United States, and settled on one out of Chicago, who is now one of my partners, Red Foundry out of Chicago. And they built this thing not knowing much about tennis, which actually turned out to be a huge benefit, because they would say, Andy, this doesn't make sense. And I go, really? Because I'm too involved.
Right.
I'm like trying, like you guys going to a tennis seminar and somebody saying, hey, no, let's go to the closed stance. And you're going, what? Rather than the open stance, blah, blah, blah. So it became kind of not only a passion because I understood it and I understood the benefits, but it also became something that I wanted to give to anybody. For instance, we have a free version, we have a paid version. The free version gives you 8 stats, the paid version gives you a lot more. But I wanted it available for parents that can't afford people like us, or don't have the ability to get to us or whatever, for them to have some guidance. And the benchmarks that are included in this show the parent, okay, for a 12-year-old, this is where you ought to be. 14-year-old, this is where you ought to be. 16, this is what changes, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know that, but how many parents of new players know that?
Yeah, that makes sense. And you talk about the benchmarks, and that's one of the cool things that you're doing now. And it's a strange thing for me, because as a human, I try not to compare myself to other humans. It's a difficult thing that you don't want to do to keep yourself happy, is not compare yourself to others. But when you're developing a child and they want to get better and they want to know where they are, those benchmarks are, I think, really going to help. Now you said 8 for free and the rest not. Bobby and I talk about this all the time. Where do you draw the line? Like, when do you start charging? When is something worth paying for, whether it's $5 a month or $100 a month, whatever it is you're working on? There's often a free version, whether it's a time frame you get to use it, to get you sucked in and get you all excited, and then they take it away. Or in your case, you've got a simpler version. So you've got what, 42 other things that you can give me, but you're going to give me 8 in the free version. Is that how it works?
Yeah, and we give you the basics. I want the parents to have a basic understanding of, like, what's the first serve percentage? Is it 100%? You guys know, no,
Oh
but
yeah.
don't they do? What do you hear the parents say? Don't miss your first serve. Okay. And they get slaughtered. Return to serve, stuff like that. Well, how well are they doing on return to serve? And that's it. So the key things are there. And we also throw in, for people that are a lot more advanced, we have a 28-day free trial of the advanced version. So they can dabble with it any way they want. And at the end of it, they can decide to take it up or not. It's up to them. Quite frankly, the other part of the basic is that it's built on virtually the same platform as the advanced. So if once you get used to the entry method of the beginner, you can go straight into the advanced with only a couple more keystrokes, and that's it.
Got it. Now I am sure Bobby's got to be licking his lips because he's got some kids that he needs some data to say, you know what, you are not what you think you are. Am I right, Bobby? Are you just looking at it that way?
Oh, I love it. I mean, yeah, because when we try to teach tennis, we try to teach them the importance of the second serve on both sides, whether you're serving or returning, and how that dictates whether or not you win the match. And they always get frustrated when we tell them, all right, we're working on second serves. And they look at me after 2 minutes and say, can I hit my first serve now? It's like, no, because that's not what's going to win or lose your match. You're winning or lost the match is the second serve. And it's good too, and it's time, because these kids are growing up in an information age. They do need the constant feedback, and we know, Shaun, down in Atlanta, this is something, especially at this price point, which is one thing I definitely was attracted to. Most of the app developers, I know you've spent a lot of time. I know you think you got something, but you just can't go out and kill the public and say, this is $50 a month. They're just not going to do it. This is something that the end user adult in Atlanta would gravitate to as well, because that's what our market is, so adult dominated, that they come in later. I think it would help them as parents, that they would now they would actually have the knowledge of, oh, the coach is right, not just, well, that doesn't work in my C2 Alta match. Well, because C2 Alta is not, well, I shouldn't say, who's watching real tennis, it's a little bit different. So, I love the idea from across the board, how it could help the entire game, and give a different way of measuring, because that's always the hardest. How do you know I'm getting better? And this is here we go. This is a great way to judge it. Look at your spin rate, your velocity, your accuracy. And especially as adults, we don't do accuracy as much with adults as we do with kids, because we're trying to rush the curve. So this is a great way for them to go, when you're done, I'm not taking out of your lesson time, go home and look to see what we were talking about. I mean, I made a blanket conversation yesterday. They said, where do you hit? I said, I try to hit the ball where the most blue is. I said, I can't make it any simpler. I'm always aiming where I see the most blue most of the time.
Yep. Yeah, they bring up a good point, and that is, the main downside of analytics is, who does it?
Yeah.
You guys are way too busy to be sitting out there watching one player and ignoring everybody else. So our goal when we even started, it was to make this app usable by a parent, mom or dad. And we know most of the moms are the ones that go to tournaments. They take the kids along, and they've usually got another kid or two tagging along, wanting to go to the bathroom, want something to eat, whatever. So we tried to make this app usable in that kind of an environment, to be able to produce that and then get to you as coaches. They can send you this data as coaches, and you can decipher it. They don't need to decipher it. So that's why we did a lot of the things that we actually started off doing, so that mom could sit there and actually take a break and run to the bathroom, come back, and pick up the match where it went off. So, or where she left off. So the app is very flexible. We can change servers, we can change receivers, we can do all that just by a tap and pick up where you are. The score means nothing. In other words, it doesn't matter whether it's 6-0, 6-0, or 7-5, 7-5, or whatever. The score means nothing, because it has nothing to do with the analytics. It has to do with your, just the final output. So all the data that goes in there, if it's accurate, to the point of if we can get like 60-70% of the information from the match and the rest we can ignore, it's pretty solid. And that's what we've already found out. The stats don't change. For instance, after a full set, the stats don't, sorry, let me get rid of that. The stats don't really change unless what I saw, I did a match against with Sabalenka and Iga yesterday. It was on TV, and Sabalenka won the first set, no problem, big time, by 15 points. In the second set, oops, she fell apart again, lost it. And then the third set, it was like da, 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 da. So I can print out with this, I can print out the first set stats to show what they both did, the second set to see what changed, and then I can do a match average, or I can print out the third set individually. If I'm a really involved coach, most people don't want all that. So what we've done recently with the new update is we've simplified it. So we have assigned a green flag to things that the student is above average in, red flags for what they're below average in. And in a matter of fact, I can show you, do we have screen sharing here, or I'll just show you? I should have asked that question earlier.
That's all right. Not something we typically do, but we could.
Okay, so okay, here we go. And so for instance, you go out, that's how you get started.
Yeah.
And we want to do stats. We're going to go to a match, and I'm going to pick out a particular match here. And oh, we're going to do that. Sorry, I'm stalling for time. Here we go. Okay, stats and match stats, and we're going to take this match yesterday. Okay, Sabalenka's, there we go. And so when you go to the actual stats button, now those who are listening can't see this, but we have the match. We can do it by set, or I can put in the benchmarks, and there's boys 14, 16, 18. Well, we go all, in this case, it's the girls 14, 16, 18, college and pro. So I've got a database that's been built over lots and lots of hundreds of matches that back this up. So we'll take women's professional. Then we have all the what we call the insights. And this is what each player did to win the most points. What did they actually do? And what did they actually do to lose the most points? So we've developed an algorithm that goes through all the data and simplifies it into the best three and the worst three. So in this training, and of course, we highlight in there, don't do anything without permission with your coach, consultation with your coach, because you may be working on something totally different than what these things are showing. So we caution them about that. This also provides you as a coach and the player with scouting information, because we have both players. So when they play again, you can take a look to see what they do. So we've tried to simplify it.
Bobby,
We've also got
what I'm thinking,
voice notes.
Sorry, Andy.
Yeah,
what I'm thinking here, Bobby, now is I can totally see this in Ladies Alpha. And then just the bunches of data that the ladies are going to have on each other. they're gonna know what's going on, and this is just it's gonna leave the junior realm. And I'm partially kidding, Andy, but the cool part about it is taking that kind of information. It's kind of the stuff we get to see on TV, right? So we get to look at it and say, oh my gosh, there's the insight. It's like having your own Brad Gilbert that says, well, you know, in this situation, you got a chance to do that, but if you'd have really done this, and we can take the data and then say, okay, here's what's going on. Now I'm still picturing Bobby with the juniors saying, hey, are we going to actually find out my weakness versus your strength, and vice versa, and see how everybody uses that? And then they can all send it back to the coach, because that could be aside from useful, it could be fun. So from a coach or a parent point of view, we can look at all this data and say, this is fantastic. We know what to work on. But I think, Bobby, would you agree the kids would enjoy having that information beyond just the numbers?
Oh, I love the whole idea. I was astonished, like Andy, the lack of analytics in tennis. I mean, I had a conversation 2 years ago, and I was shocked at that Novak was really the only person that did even any advanced scouting. And like you said, comparatively to other sports that live and breathe on this stuff, that tennis is so far behind. So I just, the biggest thing, it's accessible, it's easy to use. If you're a good coach, it's only going to reinforce what you've been saying, and hopefully, maybe identify something that you missed. But a great communication tool takes a lot of the, small talk. Look, we're going right to it. We have empirical numbers. Let's go to it. It's time, it's necessary, and I'd never limit it to just the junior stuff. That's my whole thing. I think that's one thing tennis makes a mistake. Man, they would get everybody addicted to it. Get everybody addicted to it. So
anybody who wants to improve.
If I'm a gambler, I want all this information.
That's right. Well, and here's the one of the overriding issues with a lot of the other systems, and that is they rely on you putting your camera up and videoing. Well, you can't do that at ITF events. You can't do that at a lot of events. The event can do it, but you can't. Why? Gambling. And gambling is ruining the lower level of sports, at the ITF or the events, because you as a coach cannot be using anything to gather stats. You can't be using phones or your computers. Now you can do it by hand, which, by the way, I have a hand charting sheet that I produced that you can take instead, because I got caught at one of the matches. So I simply pulled out my paper and pencil and put my phone away, and I just kept recording from where I left off, so I could enter it after the match. But the whole idea of analytics, I've never met a student who didn't say, oh, I didn't know I did that, or I did. Wow. Okay. It wasn't like, oh, don't do it. Don't do it. They thrive on it, because for the first time, they can see a black and white version of what their game really is. And most of them could not tell you where their strengths are. They have it up here, and that's good, but they can't really specify. And unfortunately, most of us coaches can't either. There's just too much happening. We see somebody double fault twice, and we think, oh my God, that's the whole match right there. Well, then we look back, and they only double faulted twice out of 100 points. So what's the big deal? It might have been the crucial ones that made it, but it's impossible as a human, is what I've found, to isolate where the major issues are. And that's what our insights, which we just came out with, that's exactly what it does. But there's one feature you guys are going to love, and that is you can record voice to text notes as the match is going along on the points. So if there's something that you're tracking, like how many times do they go to the net or don't go to the net when they could have, or attitude, or whatever it is, that the 1,000 things you're working on, you can throw a voice to text note, and that prints out at the end of the match. So you have you have the display right there to show them.
That's
At the point that it actually happened.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Like, does it print out when I said it during the match? Because when Bobby says, ooh, that double fault might be the difference. And if he puts it in the right place, and all of a sudden things change, right?
Yeah, these are printed out. So like game one will have all the notes. We have an issue with recording enough notes so that you can fit it on a page.
Right. There's a lot of data.
There's a lot of, some coaches talk a lot, some don't. And so we devoted one whole page of printout to all the comments. For instance, the match that I just did with Egan and Elena, I was trying to throw tons and tons of stupid notes on there just to see how long I could keep it up. And it actually cut me off in about midway through the third set. I can't print the notes out. So there is a limit.
There's a limit.
But it allows, so it allows you to make the comments that you would be saying under your breath anyway, and to document it. So in game one, you did this, game two, and you can actually total up how many times that thing was. Now, this old computer that we used, it did the same thing. These are called, these keys up here, they're just labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, sorry, down here, L keys. And each one we could assign arbitrarily to anything. Double faults, not going into the net, whatever you want. Because I worked with Dennis Ralston and Chris Everett when he was working with her to go to the net. And she got to be a very good volleyer from the data, because we showed that when she went to the net, when she stayed back a lot, she won almost 80% of the points because she chose when to go in on the right shot. Well, when we forced her to go in on a more often basis, she still won over 60% of the points. And that's why in the Wimbledon final with Martina, in the first set, you saw her going in and she won the set. But what happens? What happens to all her students under pressure? They go back to what they do. So then she started staying back and she lost the next 2 sets. So you can help out, but you can't really change it a lot, but you can point it out.
And typical of a coach is, hey, we can only do so much, and a player is going to do what a player is going to do. So I know Bobby's got a couple of questions, but you answered the question in passing as to the one main one that I had, which is why not video, and therefore why not the magic statistics that some of the other options out there are going to offer. And you being a real data person, you're a data guy that says, give me as much as you can possibly give me. And I don't think anybody else out there really can do that with the magic video yet. And maybe it gets there at some point. But you answered that question for me saying you can't video in all places, and you also need permission from everybody out there. So that was the answer to my question. So Bobby, he's all yours. That was the main thing I wanted to make sure I knew.
Well, the one thing I like about it, again, going back to the price point, you can do both. You know, and because the one is going to be, we always talk about this, it's going to take off because of the line calls. That's what's going to make everybody jump into that. But if this is still the price point we're talking about, this is a no-brainer from a perspective. So this is designed, do coaches buy it, and coaches could use it for numerous, or should every person, every player purchase it and be able to share with their coach?
Because of how busy you guys are, there are some coaches that will, particularly college coaches, that'll use it. And then they let their kids use the app under their name to record, so they can have 6 volunteers. Going back to volunteering, who does it at the college level and at the high school, any team of one of the issues we've always had as high school coaches is that we got too many people. What do we do with them? Well, normally we'd just let them go because we can't handle that many on a court. Well, this is another thing that they can do. We trained them up to chart matches. So we found a couple of interesting byproducts, and that is, if I take Samantha, who is just a beginning tennis player, and I show her how to do this at the beginner level, and then we move her up if she likes it. Samantha's tennis IQ skyrockets because all of a sudden she's now aware of what counts and what doesn't count. And the stupid shot, she sees like you as a coach, they see the real thing. So the people who do the charting, I'm trying to get coaches not to try and do it themselves, but to talk to their parents and get the parents to find somebody. The other avenue in a large program is that with the kids, if I'm doing an intermediate group, that means I may have advanced or beginners who I just left or whatever, and I train them to do it. And in some cases, they do it free as part of the program, like at the Princeton program way back in the 70s. If you were in an intermediate level, you actually had to volunteer to help the beginner level, just like the advanced level had to help you and volunteer. So it can be freebie, or the parent can say, hey, I'll give them $5, $10, whatever.
Is it actually volunteering if you have to do it?
Yeah, great point.
Sorry, that struck me. I'm like, if I'm forced to volunteer, it's like sharing is caring. I'm like, well, not when it's compulsory. That's not sharing or caring. That's that. Yeah. But sorry, Andy.
So that's how the coaches are mostly using it, because that way they can do practice matches at the facility as well as tournaments. Because if they get like 5 or 6 kids who can do this, a lot of those kids are going to go to tournaments. So when they're not playing, they can actually chart. So, or mom and dad is the backup. And of course, I like mom and dad because I want to get them involved, because as a coach, if they do that, they are actually giving me the information that I need to give them a report. And I can give them the stats. So Johnny has gone from a first serve percentage of 32 to 36 on a regular basis, or he's gone from 36 to 38. It's incremental improvements, which this pops up. It doesn't need to be massive. Back in the old days with Stanford, Dick Gould, and Frank Brennan, that's what they did. They got volunteers that from, I think it was from the math department, that actually did the charting. And that's why they won, what, 17 national championships? Because by the end of the season, they had data on all the players that they had played. So going through season-ending championship, piece of cake, whether they won or lost during the season. That also, it allowed each coach to lay out a unique training program for each person. You know, it might be for Bobby, it might be making your backhand more defensive instead of trying to hit winners all the time, or vice versa. It may have been first serve percentage. It may have been getting to the net. It may be, but there's so many avenues that we have to approach as a coach that we tend to pool everybody and put them all through the same thing. Well, they're all different. And this takes advantage of that, because you as a coach will know that my forehand stinks. And so I shouldn't be hitting winners with it at all.
Andy, I'm sorry, Bobby, I'm going to interrupt one more time. My brain's having fun with this. At some point, what I'm picturing is kids on a cell phone that on the back of the shirt just says, "Don't bother me, I'm using RacketStats."
Yeah.
Right? A bunch of kids in tournaments, right? There's your sales pitch on the back. "Don't bother me, I'm using RacketStats."
And that brings up a point, because I've got some parents and coaches who can't use it because they're so busy talking with everybody. So they want to talk to, you know, and parents are coming up to them and all that. That's another reason to have somebody, not the coach, doing all the information. But they're so busy they can't concentrate on the match.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, Bobby, what else you got? I want to know his King of Tennis answer. I'm
Yeah,
interested.
absolutely. Like I said, I love the idea the kids or parents, whoever watching, like you said, their tennis IQ has gone up, is going to go up. I always, the big complaint is that they don't watch enough tennis today, and that's so many of their errors are attributed to just not having that feel. So I see this being a big. I look at it as an add-on. If I'm a tournament, do I have to? You know, after the semifinals, I'm providing this. This is part of my tournament. I have two guys charting each people. This is here. This is the end of the match. This is from, you know, being involved in it. You know, like you said, literally, this should be a box. Hey, don't bother these guys. They're providing the data. You know, and I think as you see in baseball, where they're further ahead, and now the analytics are getting to the point where there's been such a proliferation of injuries with pitchers. That they're attributed to the spin speed and the velocity of the ball and condensing the time. You know, all this information, as you said, could Roscoe Tanner's shoulder been preventable? We're seeing how many people going down with the hip injuries. What is going on the court that are creating injuries that weren't necessarily part of the game 20 years ago? So,
right.
you know, the more information.
And as you pointed out, the perfect combination would be something like this with a video.
Yes.
And one of the things that I recognized a long time ago is that if you look at any of the other apps, they give you numbers. So if you beat me 6-0, the numbers are going to be very tiny. But if it's 6-4, 7-5, 6-4, whatever, the numbers are going to be a lot. So how do you relatively compare one match to the other? You can't. So we use numbers, but we also put them into either ratios or percentages, which can be compared from match to match. And that's how we build our database. So yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I haven't found any players that don't like it. I have people who say, "Oh, this is my strength," and then we show them that it isn't, and they go, "Oh." They don't yell at you. There's no argument with this. So from a parent standpoint, they don't argue with but the other thing is that you educate the parent. Hey, we do not want 100% first serves. We do not want the forehand going for winners on every shot. We do not want, this is what we need right here. And for instance, on the baseline, if you hit one winner for every 2 errors you make, you're okay. Serving is the opposite. You better be hitting 2 aces for every double fault before you're okay in the ballpark. You know, things like that. So we can get them thinking in terms of, okay, the kid did this, but let's take a look at the big picture. Well, you can't take a look at the big picture anymore because nobody's got all this information. Now you can take a picture. So all these stats are available during the match. So if you're a high school or a college coach, you can go up to the whoever's charting and say, wait, what's going on? And, you know, out of all those 44 stats, really most people fall into a category where there's only 4 or 5 that really count, that their game is based on. It's not 44. That's where the coach comes in. We don't even pretend to tell you what to teach or how to teach. We just want to give you the information so that you can do whatever you want. Because you know, some of us are crazy. We're building up a great backhand or whatever forehand, and it destroys the kid's game temporarily, but then eventually it works. So how do you convince the parents? Well, you convince them through the report card. Oh, report card. Oh, I think Johnny's backhand's getting better. No, Johnny's backhand has gone from a win error ratio of, 0.2 to 0.25. It's which doesn't mean too much relevant. But you see, but it is something that you can show improvement.
And all of it for $6 a month. I mean, that's really cool. And that's just the paid version. There is also the free version. I love it, Andy. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And you can broadcast it. One of the features on here is that you can send this information live while the match is in progress, along with the score and some basic stats. So anybody who wants to follow it, mom, dad, grandma, they can all follow it as well.
Oh, so that's really the tennis nerd, so to speak, that says it's like Bobby. Somebody used to listen to baseball games on the radio. I thought that, well, okay, I guess baseball, you can kind of listen to the radio. But I had a friend that listened to tennis matches on the radio. I'm like, that just doesn't work for me. But then just to watch a tennis match with only statistics is just strange to me. But there's a mind out there that says, hey, you know what? That's kind of cool to look down. Let's say, even if I'm a coach and I'm wandering around the facility of a bunch of kids playing tennis matches, and I can have the scores and the data and everything going on and say, you know what, I need to run over there and give a cheer or something. There are a lot of different ways this could go well. I'm excited about taking a look at it further.
Well, your commentators on TV, of course, cannot watch one match unless it's the finals. And where do they get the comparisons between the two? These are all, analytic statisticians that are providing this stuff. And the art of television is entertainment and education. If you're the commentator and I can provide you with some real insight as to how this match is going, one or two things, not 50, that you can go on TV and say, this is what's, Andy's first serve percentage has fallen well below his average, and that's why he's struggling, or blah, 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 the backhander, they're not going to the net as much, or whatever it happens to be. But I can provide that as a statistician to you to make watching TV even more interesting.
But I'm in. I know Bobby's in. Every time I kick it back to Bobby, because Bobby's sometimes like, hang on, how do you do this? How do you do that? Bobby's just like, today, he's like, I love it. Sounds great. Give me one.
Well, if there's anybody listening that's in charge of juniors or whatever, I would love to come over to Atlanta and have a meeting with them and or parents at the same time and explain the same thing to them. And then it's up to them as to whether the parents as to whether they want to use it or not.
Now he's talking our language, Bobby.
Yep. Well, if we could, GPTA meeting Thursday night. Get him on a call. Get him down here.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll see you tonight. I like that a lot.
Fly.
Exactly. Well, Andy, I do have one last question, and I really love finding out how people would change the world, so to speak, the tennis world. And I know from who you are and what you do, but you're more than just a stats guy. You're also a tennis coach. You've also been around tennis for a long time, and we appreciate that mindset to be able to say, hey, I've seen this much tennis and how it's evolved and how it's changed, good and bad and all that. So I do want to ask one last question, what we call our king of tennis question, which is, if you were king of tennis for however long, for in whatever level, in whatever space, whatever interests you, if you were king of tennis, is there anything you would do or change?
I think Bobby brought it up earlier, and that is we need somebody on lines. I think that's super, super important. There's so much, well, you guys have seen it. It's a disaster at the junior level. And I know parents that have pulled their kids out of tennis because there's nobody overseeing all the cheating that's going on. Line calling would solve that. That actually would be probably my number one choice because it would keep more people involved.
Right.
And the kids who were ethical, all right, they might win a few more matches, but they would at least not leave thinking everything is unfair. That's probably, I mean, it's just, we got to find a way to make tennis a little bit more accessible. And the problem being is we've got a lot of coaches, but everything costs money. And there are an awful lot of kids. It's funny, last night I watched the movie on Serena and Venus, and it just brought to mind, that's how I got started playing tennis, was on a street, was in a beat up old courts and stuff like that. My brother and I fortunately I had a brother that I could pick on, or vice versa. And that's how we learned. And somehow today we've lost that. Where are the backboards that you guys probably grew up with? Where are they? Because at the Orange Bowl one year, there was a story about a blonde girl that was hitting against the backboard for hours and hours and nobody could get on. Well, that turned out to be Bjorn Borg. So, and he grew up hitting against the garage door and that sort of thing. So that's missing. And, all these nice programs and stuff are great, but there's always, where I came from and started in tennis was Columbus, Indiana. And there's a fella down there by the name of Bob Burnett, who was I believe was a shop teacher. And I was hitting with his son, who was a state ranked player. But he said, I want to take my family on a vacation. And I said, oh, he says, could you take over my classes? And I'm going, you're kidding. I've never taught before. He said, well, come down and I'll show you. Well, it was chaos. There were balls flying every place and everything. But you know what? The courts were packed. And we lack people. We don't foster the growth of those kind of people. Was he a tennis player? No, he was, not a tennis player, but he had the ability to attract kids. And as well as you all know, you can almost, like in golf, you can almost make it near the top with almost no instruction if you're really talented. The rest of us need a lot of help, some more than ever. But there's the area that I think we're lacking in. Is just getting kids involved and showing them that, hey, this is fun. I love hitting a ball. I don't care where it is. I just want to hit a ball. So those are the two areas I would attack.
Okay. Well, in that case, next time we talk, Andy, I want answers as to how you're going to do it. So we're eventually going to consider not just what are you going to do as king, but how. So how are you going to fix the line calling? Maybe there's a magic app. Maybe RacketStats at some point jumps into that business. And then how do we make it more accessible? Because I find that different than making it affordable. Making it accessible, I think, is a different answer that you're going to have to come up with a different solution. So I'm going to hold you accountable to that. Andy,
by the way, Baseline already has the line calling features, as do a couple of the others. But you got to have it. You got to have those things.
It exists, but it's not free yet. So we'll figure out how to get everybody afford it, all those things. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Andy,
guys,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
I appreciate
Bobby,
Thank you,
Bobby,
sir.
as always. Thank you so much, Andy. Like I said, I'm going to follow up. We're looking for answers always. And we'll make sure everybody knows about what you're doing and spread the word. And we'll get statistics in everybody's hand if we can help it.